This is Henry Washington, and you're listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast.
If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash the like and subscribe buttons. If you're listening to our podcast, go leave us a 5-star review. All of our links can be found in the video description or show notes below.
Hey, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavagioni. Tanya couldn't be with us today. She sends her regards, but super excited because today our special guest is Roy Snarr. And Roy, I'm super excited to talk to you, learn about your story, learn about you and what you do. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much. I'm excited to be talking with you and sharing some of the experiences that I've had, and hopefully people can get a lot out of it.
Absolutely. So, hey, let's kick this off the same way we do every podcast episode, and we want to know more about you. So if you could share a little bit about yourself, tell us your story. Who is Roy Snarr?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm happy to start off with that. So my background is not entrepreneurship originally, and our family really didn't have much at all. Now, if we fast forward today, I'll go back to the starting of all this. We run a financial services agency company, and what we do, we focus on asset protection, life insurance, annuities, and long-term care. That just happened to be the entrepreneur path that I took. And we've been able to excel at it, and I've learned lots of lessons in life growing a business. And I was one of those overnight successes that took a decade. Okay. Nothing
overnight.
Overnight, right? Like, with TikTok and Instagram, people are standing in front of somebody else's Ferrari saying, hey, I did this in 3 weeks. Well, the reality is it probably won't happen that way. At least that was my experience. So I love sharing these challenges and the journey and the successes, so that way people that are going through it now, there is light at the end of the tunnel as long as you stick with it. So to try to give you a little bit of a background of my life story, my family and I, we grew up just middle class, not like poor, and not rich, but just middle class, average Americans. I grew up doing commercial logging with my father in the Midwest, and then I lived with my mother in California when I was in school. So kind of back and forth, right? And the whole mindset was, hey, work hard, go to college, get a degree, and everything will work out for itself. We really want you to get a college degree. And that's common. My parents wanted the absolute best for me. And I didn't know much about entrepreneurship other than the fact that when we did some commercial logging and other construction, it was kind of like our own practice where we just go to clients, they'd pay us and we do some work. That was my first taste of entrepreneurship. But after years of doing that, I was like, wow, I don't know if I want to cut trees down the rest of my life or dig ditches. This is not that great. I want to do something much different. But as a young kid, I didn't know any better, just working away and going to school. But where things really changed for us, I was about 14 years old. My mother became disabled. Somebody ran a stop sign, bam, sideswiped her. And it was the person just simply wasn't paying attention. And this led to the acceleration of what she already had that we did not know that she had, which was degenerative disc disease. And so that accident threw everything in a wrench. From that one single event, we ended up losing that car. And then she lost her job because she was no longer able to work. This was in 2001 when the dot-com bubble burst. So most of all of her life savings were in high-risk investments. All of this was coming together at one single point. In addition to that, a divorce came about with a stepfather. I ended up moving with my mother up north. We were in Southern California. We moved all the way up north to the Central Coast. And I was, about 15, 16 when we moved, out of a school district that I grew up in my whole life. So everything changed from one single car accident. And 14, 15, you don't know anything about money. You're like, hey, I'm Pokemon cards, riding my bicycle. Like, what's all the money and taxes and stuff? But I do remember one source of income that we had, which was a Social Security disability income check. And I remember seeing that check. I'm like, what in the world is Social Security? So as I got older, I started studying different things in college, genetic engineering. Then I took chemistry. I'm like, this is not for me. And then I studied cultural anthropology and history because I was just curious about it. But that Social Security check always stuck in my head. I was like, man, I wonder if how does all this financial stuff even work? So then I started studying finances, and then I ended up writing a book on Social Security, became a national Social Security expert, and then I learned about pensions and other financial services, and that quickly opened my eyes and be like, wow, my mom didn't have any of these protection measures in place. There was no life insurance, there was no disability insurance, there was no safe money investing, nothing. It was just all pure high risk. I was like, wow, I wonder if there's a way I could teach people about this and earn a living. And so I started thinking about this subconsciously. I got to do something different. I did not want to just study 9 to 5 in school. And so what I ended up doing is I talked to a lot of my friends in college. You don't want advice for them, right? Because their advice is, hey, this beer tastes better than that beer. But I was like, hey, what do your parents do for a living? So I started asking about what their parents do. And one of my friends at the time said, hey, I have a friend who's in the financial services industry. And if you want to go talk to him, I think they're hiring, you might get an internship. I said, sure. I walked in there, Copenhagen ring on my Wranglers, boots that were dirty, cut off flannel shirt. I didn't know any better. And I walked in there and said, hey, look, I'm curious about what this is, what the financial industry has to offer. And I don't know anything about it. And I'm green, but I'm willing to learn. And that was the first start of my journey. Just like a lot of people find success in real estate, you have to go through and get your license. And so I went through and I got my insurance license. And then I saw all these big numbers on the screen and the billboard, like, hey, look at this guy. He just made 100,000, 200, 300. I was like, whoa, if these people are making that much money, man, I know I could make that no problem. I remember calling my mom. We're going to be making hundreds of thousands of dollars in less than a year. I got this thing. Well, then I got my license and started actually doing the practice. And I learned quickly, it's like, wow, this entrepreneurship, owning your own business, purchasing marketing materials, leads, going through objections with people. I said, this is a lot harder than what they made it seem like. And this is at the spur of YouTube and everything else. And I was watching all these videos of all these success stories. And I wanted that so bad myself. And I did not know how to get there. So I struggled for years. I tell this story. I have a national training agency as well, where we train other financial professionals. And I tell them it took me 5 years to hit that 6-figure mark. And then any other shows that you listen to, and even yourself, you've mentioned before, once you hit that 6-figure mark, that's a huge milestone. It really is. And then the next 6 figures is easier than the first. I don't know why, it just is, probably based on the experience that got you to the first 100. You could duplicate that experience, is my opinion. But once I hit that, it was 5 years later, and I wanted to quit. I hated it, but I loved talking to people, and I loved helping them with life insurance, long-term care insurance, and safe money retirement stuff, because these were all guarantees by big billion-dollar insurance companies. I didn't charge anybody fees. I just got paid a commission. So I knew I wanted to do it, but I wanted to figure out how to actually get to that point to become full-time. And it took me 5 long, struggling years to hit that. And then we finally hit our 7-figure mark in about the 10th year. And then from there, it's just been quadrupling itself and building, and we're getting better. And now we're giving back to the agent community in itself.
All right. Awesome, man. Great story, great background, just learning about you and how you got to where you are today. And the way you started this off, basically saying, yeah, I'm an overnight success that took 10 years to get there. And that is so true, right? A lot of people think that I can get into any type of financial services or real estate or learn how to invest or day trade and do this and that, and I'll become rich in a week. And unfortunately, that's not how it works. Maybe if you got in early when some of that crypto stuff was going on and you got out before it all dropped to nothing and everyone else got screwed, then maybe, yeah, that was a possibility. But yeah, it's highly unlikely that anybody can really do that at this point, right? But I think the one of the most important things that I'm hearing as you were sharing your story is that, one, you didn't give up, right? You kept going, you kept working hard, you kept trying to figure out what's the best solution, right?
Mhm.
The other piece that I heard is that you were able to overcome like some serious adversity, right? With what happened when you were 14 years old, the car accident, your mother now becoming disabled and having to deal with that, and then having to move across the state. That's a lot of stuff to try to take on while you're trying to figure life out, right? I took down some notes here as you were going, and it sounded like when you were a child, the way that your mother wanted you to basically just go out and do things. It's just the typical American dream. Hey, go to school, go get a good job. And you're like, yeah, but there's something else in there. There was this little bug that was biting at you, right? It was that entrepreneurial bug. I'm glad that you found that when you went that way, because a lot of people, they'll just say, I'm just going to stick with the standard thing here.
Right.
But what's interesting, I think for me that you said was when you were in college and you were trying to figure out what's the best way to go, you didn't just ask for advice from your college buddies. Cause like you said, they can be like, oh, well, this is a better beer than that one. What's on their mind when they're in college, when they're not in class, right?
I was like, I'm
let's
broke
go
and
have a good
drinking
time.
same low class beer as you. Like, why am I going to
Yeah.
get your advice?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But instead you were like, hey, what do your parents do? Right. And that's very interesting, right? I don't think I've heard anybody say anything like that before. I'm wondering what their friends' parents did, or because sometimes you might become friends with somebody that you're going to school with and not even realize like how affluent they are because of
Right.
something that their parents did, right? You just know them as your college drinking buddy. Very interesting that you went that way. And actually, I wanted to ask you, what made you think to ask that particular question? You know what? You're in school, you're trying to focus on everything else. What made you say, hey, man, what does your parents do?
I think a lot of it came down to the cars they were driving, because I had an old beat up pickup truck that I
Sure.
bought.
Okay.
And I was like, well, wait a second. These kids are going to school. It's all being paid for. They got a nice car. I didn't want to take advice from somebody that hasn't been through an experience. I knew enough at that time to have that realization. So I don't know, something inside of me just started asking, what do your parents do? And I literally dozens and dozens of friends that we had, every one of them. And some of them I was pretty interested in. And I said, hey, you know what? Can I call your dad and call your mom? They're like, yeah, sure, I guess. That's kind of weird. But I was like, no, it's not weird.
Yeah. I was going to say, how did that conversation go?
Exactly. A lot of them went pretty well. The parents were like, hey, that's so cool. They were humble. And they said, hey, we work for this biotech company. If you want to do it, this is what you got to study. And I took notes and I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to put this on my little vision board and kind of go through the pros and the cons and would I want to do that? And then we do a little bit of research in that field. And I'm like, oh man, under a microscope all day, not for me. I'm way too social. And then I just kind of process of elimination. And then it happened to be what I believe my calling, when one of those colleagues of mine said, hey, go talk to my friend who's in insurance and in financial services. I was like, dude, I don't even know how to spell that. Okay, let me go talk to him. And it just grabbed me. I was like, wow, I think this is what I want to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also, I really like the fact that you said you put the stuff on your vision board, and then on top of that, you went and you researched it and you realized that, okay, this one right here might not be a good fit for me. However, this one over here is looking promising, right? So you put in the effort, right? You educated yourself, right? Not only were you going to college, but you were also educating yourself on what your career should be, right? And in doing so, doing the research, figuring out what's the right move, setting yourself up for success. So another thing you had talked about, Roy, is you had mentioned that difficult to get that first 100K, right?
Oh, yeah.
That one takes the longest. It's definitely the hardest. And then it's the same thing could be said for your first million, right? I think no matter how many zeros you add to it, the first one is always the hardest, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, the second one got easier. The third one got easier. And part of that, I think we talk about compound interest all the time, right? But I don't think we talk about like the compound effects of success, right?
Yeah.
So you make that first 100K, you've fallen into something that you are getting better at, right? You get better every day. And that is also compounding, right? So not only are you able to invest in products and get compound interest, but you're also investing in yourself and getting better at your craft, right? And by getting better at your craft, you're getting more clients. You're able to figure out better ways to manage your time. And I don't think that's something we really talk about too much. I wanted to ask you, like, from where you got from your first 100K, right? I think you said that was what, in 5 years? And then it took over the next 5 years to get to the million, right?
Right.
Which is fantastic, by the way. But I want to ask you, what kind of the steps over that 5-year period that you felt like you had to improve on to get there? And then once you were there, what did you do to continue to move up the ladder?
Oh, great question. Well, one of the things, on that first 100,000, for example, let's go there real quick. I read a book, Think and Grow Rich, very classic, right? And this is coming from, I had no idea about anything. I'm like, what do you mean thoughts have frequencies? What is this, hocus pocus? And then I went down this huge rabbit hole of metaphysics, and it was just fascinating to me. And then I started actually believing that my thoughts and how I'm acting and thinking and everything else, if I write things down, put them on a vision board, it helps it to come to fruition. You can't just sit in a room and think about a Ferrari and it pops up. You got to work towards it. But that's what really helped me shift my mindset to have the confidence in knowing that I could accomplish this six-figure goal. And in the very beginning, I used to literally sit at Starbucks. I would door knock to sell life insurance. I mean, it was not easy. But I put my back up against the wall. I didn't have a plan, a backup plan. And I think that's one of the challenges of entrepreneurship today. It's so easy to switch your topics around. And so I said, hey, this is the only thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to make it work because others have made it work and I can as well. And now it does take a level of passion because of the challenges. If you don't have the passion for it, the challenges will kick you out of that. And so I did have a passion for it. That's one of the things that people have to discover. Like, you need to have a passion for what you're doing. At least that's my consensus. And I just stayed focused and hitting those numbers and talking to those people and slowly growing and scaling it. And then it came to a time where I started auditing my own time. That was a big life changer for me. Because once I hit that first 100,000, I was sporadic. I was sleeping in or staying up late. I was all over the place, but I finally got that first 100,000. And then I think it cost me like 70,000 in expenses to get there the first time, right? Top line and bottom line, way different numbers. I was like, wow, I hit it. I knew I could do this. But why can't I do 250 and then 300 and 500? How are other people doing that? And I always thought to myself,
Started to think bigger.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I started to think way bigger because I was enculturated in this ideology of not to think big, not intentionally. It just wasn't present. And so when I started being able to think way bigger, I was like, wow, how do people do this? And I always thought of like the CEO of Apple, the CEO of Google, Warren Buffett, these hyper successful people. I was like, what do I have in common with them? Well, the thing that we all have in common is 24 hours in a day. So I said, wait a second, I wonder how they're spending their days. So then I went down a rabbit hole of how these ultra high successful people spend their days. And I quickly realized they were very, very disciplined about their time. And it's so easy. I love YouTube shorts, right? I'll watch Aliens or something else. And then next thing you know, an hour goes by. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I would have taken that 1 hour of time and focused on my craft more, and I did that every single day, that compound to your point effect of knowledge and time effort is immense. It's like golfing, right? You could be a quarter inch off, but by the time that ball gets all the way across the field, it's 10 feet off, right?
Well, yeah, social media can be that slippery slope, right?
Yes.
Where you might start off with good intent, right? So I could tell you when I first got on TikTok, right, I was only looking up like finance content, business owners, and just different things like that. But every now and then, as you're going through, there's some stupid cat video or something, and I start watching it and laugh. I'm like, oh, okay, that's pretty funny. But because I watched it over a certain period of time, it starts infiltrating into my feed, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
Getting more and more and more. And then as you're going through, you got more and more nonsense, and you're like, wait, what was I doing again? What was I trying to look at? And so, yeah, that can definitely be a slippery slope. So I really appreciate the fact that you're talking about how you should be disciplined with your time, because I think a lot of times people can get lost with that. Even when you're successful, I found this happening to myself, and I know so many other people, successful people, that this happens to as well. But it's complacency, right? You start to get complacent. And in the military, I did 20 years in the Navy, right? We would always talk about how complacency kills, right? So you have to be careful. You can't sit here and just get so comfortable that you're not aware of your surroundings. It's good to live with a little discomfort, right? It's good to make yourself step outside of that comfort zone and always peek back in, right? Because you have to understand that there's still stuff happening outside of your little bubble of success that you think you're in, right? I don't know. I'm sorry, that kind of just triggered something to me. So I had to.
No, that's awesome. It just goes down to what you're saying of thinking big, right? Because a lot of people in today's dollars, if you're doing 100, that's the average middle income family. It's still hard to survive and do things, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Pressures. But let's say you're doing 250,000. You're going to have a generally comfortable lifestyle, depending on where you live. But then you become content. And then some people will stay at that level. They won't want to stretch and get bigger. And that's okay. Some people are built with the entrepreneurial spirit to just go out there and go get it all. But I think comfort is a big killer of a lot of entrepreneurs. Oh, hey, I had this income level. I got all this. And you just have to ask yourself personally, hey, look, do I want to be able to achieve more? And one of the things that has always stuck with me is I always think in the future. So if I'm 95 years old or however long I live, and I'm sitting in that rocking chair, am I going to have any regrets and think back, wow, if I would have just done a little bit more, life would have been so much better for my family and my legacy and myself. That is my biggest driver. And I'm like, that's why we work so hard now. It's like, I'm never going to have that regret. I'm going to give 100% into it. And that way, when I get to that point in time, I'm going to be like, look, I did everything I could within my capacity. Will I be the Elon Musk of the world? Probably not, but that's okay, right? That's not one of my personal goals. So I always keep that in mind because time goes by so fast. And if you don't closely watch it, it will escape from you.
100%. So actually, that makes me think about something I want to ask you. So I was on a mastermind call this morning with some of the folks that I'm in a mastermind group with. So I run one of the, like we split up into smaller sections that we call squads, right? So I'm a squad leader for this mastermind that I'm in. And the conversation I was having with one of the guys today was sometimes when you're pushing and you're successful and you say, you try to go back to remembering what your why is, right? So what is your why? Your why for a lot of us, and this is probably similar for you because you kind of just mentioned it, was to get more of that time freedom, right? To be able to spend more time with family and be present, right? And I feel like part of the conversation that we had was sometimes you get lost in just trying to get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. That you wind up taking that time that was supposed to be for family and for that time freedom that you wanted, and you spend that trying to become more successful, right? Or trying to get to the next biggest thing. So I feel like a lot of times we have to tell ourselves, okay, when is enough enough? When can I slow things down, right?
Sure.
And so I wanted to ask you, right? Because obviously that 10-year journey to get to where you're at, obviously it took some time, right? And you had to dedicate a lot of hours to it, as all entrepreneurs do that are becoming more and more successful. So what do you do to mitigate the absence away from family, friends, and things like that as you're pursuing success? What are some of the things that you do or some tools that you can recommend that can help somebody mitigate that?
Totally. And great points. It comes down to there's two levels of freedom, in my opinion. You just basically hit on both of them. There's financial freedom and then there's time freedom, right? So it got to a point where I was working literally 7 days a week and didn't have any type of life. Now, fortunately and luckily, I'm a workaholic. I loved it. But then my wife and I got married. We weren't married at the time. Then we got married. Now we have 3 kids. So life's a little bit different. If I'm at the office until 9 o'clock at night, every single night, that ain't going to happen. Not with 3 kids. Like, she'd kill me. So I had to figure out quickly. It's like, I want to achieve these higher levels of success. I want to keep going, but I also don't want to spend 24 hours a day doing it. And I go back to the ultra high successful people. I said, okay, how can I create leverage within my practice to scale the financial aspect of it? But by doing so, I gain the time freedom aspect of it. And there's an old adage, oh, you can't buy time. Well, actually you can. So you can buy time by having more people and through delegation, take over tasks that you're not good at. And that's where the hardest.
I 100% agree with that. Yeah. Me personally, like I have a VA that does a lot of minuscule tasks for me that I just don't want to spend my time doing. Right.
Right.
Have you ever read the book Traction?
I had not read Traction.
Okay. That's a great book. It's very good with organizational management, but also Who Not How. Have you read that?
I haven't read that one, but I read Buy Back Your Time. But that's where
I Yeah. Very, very similar aspect, right?
Right.
Putting the right person in the right job. Yeah. Man, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Cause I feel like a lot of times we get lost in the sauce, right? So that's very important. Delegation is powerful, right?
Oh, so much. It's, if we look at the amount of expenses we have via payroll or commission sharings, it's massive, 7 figures, but that's okay. I can't do it all. And nor do I want to. We're only good at a few things. I am absolutely terrible at paperwork. I am just not that person, right? I enjoy communicating with people, helping explain a solution. And then we have a whole team that they don't want to do that. They just like to process the paperwork, administrative, tactical stuff. And that's awesome. And it's really, really hard to do in the beginning. And then it's also hard because as a natural entrepreneur, like, you know what, don't even worry about it. I'll just do it. You know what, Mike, I'll do it. I'll take care of it. I got it.
That's a slippery slope.
Oh, it is. It is because you have other people do it. There are going to be errors. Could it be done better by you? Yes, probably. But then there's no way that you can do it all. So that's the next level The next ceiling of complexity, right? Dan Sullivan, like the next ceiling of complexity is like, okay, now you're at this point, you can make financial freedom. How do you start doing delegation and getting more and more time? So basically, my whole goal is to get to a point where I'm only doing what exactly I want to do. And I have all these other folks helping me with all the other stuff that I don't want to do and that I'm not good at either. And it takes some time and some money, but I think one of the big challenges entrepreneurs have is that they're afraid to invest into themselves. It's a lack of confidence. And confidence is literally the only thing you have. You can't control. If I'm trying to sell you a policy, Mike, and you say it's not right for me, I can't control that feeling that you have. I can only control my output. And it's a fine balance. And then you have to take that chance of spending the money and hiring someone to help delegate these tasks, or get a virtual assistant, bite the bullet, get that. And then you'll be amazed on how much more your life frees up. It's awesome. But some entrepreneurs, they're reluctant to do so because they may be on that fine line where they don't quite have the money yet. And you have to ask yourself, and if you have a family, it's even harder. I need to take this next level of chance. And that's what I did. When I moved from California to Texas, I had absolutely zero clients here. I knew one person, which was my real estate agent. That was it. And I maxed out every single business card, and I started basically all over again. And that was in 2019. And I knew I could make it happen. I had that much confidence in myself. Was I terrified? Well, hell yeah, I was terrified, but I knew I could make it happen. And I think a lot of people, they get to this level of comfort and they're scared to take that next chance. They lose that hunger at the very beginning and that excitement, but you need to maintain it.
And that can be hard to maintain, actually, Roy. So I find myself getting in a rut every now and then. I'm just like, I don't do this anymore. Or, man, there's just certain things this is too time consuming, or I don't feel like I'm really getting a great return on the time I'm putting into this. So what do you do to re-energize yourself, right? To stay on that track, especially, I mean, man, 2019, you moved to a whole new area. You had no clients, nothing. And then I can only imagine what was going through your head when 2020 hit and freaking COVID happened. And you're like, what do I do now? So actually, I want to ask you, Roy, so what happened, man? So you moved there in 2019.
Yeah.
Right? So I had no idea about this with you. So that's kind of crazy. So you moved there in 2019, 2020 pandemic happens. What happens to Roy Snarr?
Well, a lot of creativity is what happened, because the way that we gain clients is through like workshops, like teach classes on Social Security, financial planning, stuff like that, right? All the workshops were closed out. You couldn't meet with people in person.
Right.
And not a lot of people before that time, especially seniors, were really in tune with Zoom, right? Or video conferencing, maybe FaceTime the grandkids. That was about it, right? And so we had to figure out and pivot quickly, because in 18, it was stressful. 19, I was like, ooh, finally coming above board. And then boom, all of our marketing, all of our strategies went out the window. We weren't a virtual company to begin with, so we're all in person. So we had to pivot quickly. And so what I had to start doing is learning how Zoom worked and go through that whole process. I'm not a computer guy. And then coaching clients through the Zoom appointments. It was brutal, but we made it through. We made it work. And our revenues actually increased in 2020 versus over 2019. And that's because we had to make it happen. And so we started helping people with easier lines of coverage, such as life insurance. People buy that over the phone all the time. But if I'm helping them with a retirement plan with $1 million, kind of hard to do that just over the phone. You need to have some visualization, Zoom or something along those lines. So that was a very pivotal year. But what it did is that it taught me, like, all the failures that we've had along the way, all these challenges, max out cards, it's all experiences. Because you look at anybody successful, unless they're a trust fund baby, they had to go through all these challenges, which makes you stronger, more adaptive, because we cannot control what the government's going to do. We can only control what we have on our outputs, right?
Yeah, and we only control our reaction to it.
That's true. You're right. And so like that COVID situation, as terrible as it was, if you look at it, if you had to find something positive about it, was the virtual acceptance of business and the adaptation that you can have within the business. Even though we were doing the same thing for so long, the whole industry doing the same thing for so long, all of a sudden it got thrown upside down. And a lot of people failed. They got out of the business, they quit, they couldn't make it. And I was like, we are not going to be that team that does not make it. We will push through this and figure out a way.
Yeah, no, I love that. So you were very adaptable and creative in your response. I think that's huge. I got actually back into real estate investing after being out of it for a very long time, because when I first got into it, it was the end of 2007. 2008 happened. So I was just like, whoa,
Perfect timing.
okay. So I got out, and then 2019, I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I'm investing in real estate again. Like, I need to focus. I was like, I'm coming close to retiring from the Navy. I need to make sure that I've got all my ducks in a row and I set myself up for success. And then 2020 happens, and I'm like, really? Like, you don't want me to do this or what?
Right.
But yeah, you got to get creative, right? And figured out ways to work around things. And I was able to get my renters some relief with these COVID like rent repayment programs and stuff. And
Yeah.
it worked out. I was able to make it work. So it's funny when you back somebody into a corner and they show their true character, right?
Yeah,
I think that's, and you'll see the people that are going to fail. And then you're going to see the people that are going to say, hey, I'm going to figure out how to make this work and move on. Right.
Yeah. Anybody can be happy when things are peachy, right? It's those that are consistently happy and having the confidence that it will work out even when times are not that great. Because that's going to happen no matter what,
Look at post-pandemic, right? There was like this season for real estate that was just beautiful and amazing.
Yeah.
And now look at what's happening now, right?
Right.
All the people it makes me think of Game of Thrones, right? You know how you have like, oh, my dear sweet summer child, like you don't know what winter's like, right? And then winter comes.
Yeah.
Right? And now some of these people that got into it, and some investors that are like, yeah, this was great. I was able to do this, like flippers and wholesalers and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
And now winter's come, and they're like, oh, I didn't store enough food. This might get rough, right? I think that's something that everybody needs to be mindful about. Like things happen in seasons, right? So you need to make sure you prepare yourself when the season is good, that your harvest is good, that when things slow down and there's a famine, you're still covered, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And going back to your other thing too, to piggyback on what you just said as well, sometimes you need a reset, right? Because you can get burnout quick, no matter what you're doing. And that's, I mean, you've experienced it, and I've definitely experienced it multiple times. That's like, I'm just like, oh, this is just too much. I'm frustrated. So what I do is I'll take like a 2-day trip in our camper or an Airbnb. I disconnect, but I'm still thinking about business. You never stop thinking about it. But it's nice to sometimes disconnect and be like, okay, let me regroup. And you can do that within a few hours or a day or two. So sometimes you have to do that in order to weather the next storm that's coming in. And to your point, make sure you have enough set aside, because it's not always going to be gravy, no matter what industry you're in. And everything is constantly changing. You have to be adaptive in those changes. And I think that's the biggest lesson from COVID, business-wise. Yeah.
No, I love it. I love it. And it's just something you can take with you anywhere in life, right? When I talk about being successful in investing or finances or anything like that, it's the way I look at it is you can be successful in anything if you use the right tools and keep the right tools in your toolkit, right? Here's some things, like the basic things you need. You need to be able to educate yourself and learn. You need to be able to network with people. You need to be coachable and have a good mentor or a good coach. And then the biggest thing of all is you have to take action. And if you don't take action, all those other things don't even matter. You could be the smartest person in the room with absolutely nothing under your name because you never actually acted upon it.
I love that. They say knowledge is power. Well, applied knowledge is power.
Yes, exactly. Applied knowledge is power. So I love that, Roy. I mean, this conversation probably didn't go the way that I thought either one of us thought it was going to go. Yeah. But I think it's really great to talk about these things when it comes to your mindset and just how do you structure your day-to-day life when you're trying to become successful, or when you're already successful and trying to maintain that level of success, right? And I feel like this is an important lesson for a lot of people that just might not know how to get there, right? So I really appreciate that. And actually with that, Roy, I would like to go ahead and transition this into something that I call the final round. It's where I'm going to ask you the same 4 questions I ask everybody that comes on this show. It helps give us some insight as to how you respond to some things under pressure, which I'm sure you're going to crush it.
Okay, let's do it. I love it.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so Roy, the first question of the final round is, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made when it comes to your finances or your business life?
So I'll give you 2 of them. Okay. So when it comes to the business life first, the biggest mistake that I ever made was the lack of confidence I had in myself not to think bigger sooner. Because if I would have had the same mindset, not the same level of success, but the same mindset years ago, I'll be 10 times what I am today. So that's number one business mistake that I've made. It wasn't necessarily like a bad investment. It's just the fact that I didn't have confidence in myself. I didn't think I could do it for the longest period of time. And then when I just tricked myself to believing, hey, I can do this, even though I may not have fully believed it, I just kept lying to myself. And then it actually happened. So that's the biggest downfall in business. I tell agents that if you could go start doing these actions now, it will make a huge difference. Financially, there's been a lot of mistakes financially. We invested into this software company. My family and I, we sold a farm in Missouri, and we invested in a software company. All the IP was stolen, everything. We lost all that money. I was like, oh, that is a terrible decision. And you know why it happened is it was a lack of research, and I ignored my intuition on it. And so it was myself, another good friend of mine, great person. It wasn't his doing. It was just the doing of these others. But I just kind of ignored the intuition in the side of, oh, hey, this is all going to work out. So I'm a big, firm believer on following your gut and your intuition. Let that lead. I make big 6, 7 figure decisions today on intuition. And then I back them up with logic.
Yeah. Wow. That's, you got to trust your gut sometimes, you know?
Totally.
Things might look great on paper, and then all of a sudden you just get that uneasy feeling like, hey, look into why I'm feeling this way. There's something in there. Something's giving me goosebumps. Oh, wow. That's rough, but I appreciate you sharing that. So, Roy, this next question, these all kind of tie into each other. And that is, what is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you first started out?
Well, there's 2 sides of that coin. So one side pertains to like basically my practice and other entrepreneurial practice, I guess you could say, but is marketing on the content and the services that I do. I never did that for the longest period of time. I thought it was a waste of money. I was like, I'll just network with people. I never spent the money on invest back into myself. I never took advantage of paid training or coaching programs. I thought it was a waste of money. So if I could go back in time, I'm like, you know what? I wish I would have invested in that, because that's one thing that no one can take away from me is my knowledge, right? And you have to learn how to actually go in and invest into yourself. That was probably the biggest thing there.
Yeah. Okay, that right there is huge, because that was one of the things I was talking about, right? Like you need to be able to be coachable or be able to have a mentor.
Yeah.
Man, I feel like a lot of people think, oh, I'll just do it on my own. And a lot of times you don't realize a lot of people that are very successful did not do it by themselves. There's a lot of people that are behind them, pushing them, right? I've paid a lot of money for coaching. I pay money for mentorships. That's why I'm in a mastermind. It's just one of the things that helps push me and keep that motivation level up, right? When we talked earlier about what is it that you do to keep yourself motivated to stay on track, like this is one of those tools in your tool belt that can help you stay motivated and keep your mind where it needs to be, right? No, I think that's huge, Roy. Okay. The next question is,
Sure.
do you have any tips or tricks that you would recommend to someone that is just getting started today?
Yeah. So if you're just getting started in the entrepreneurial journey, or even if you work a 9 to 5, nothing wrong with that, and you're comfortable with it. I mean, number one is figuring out your finances, because you can't start a business, you can't balance your family budget unless you have the fundamentals of finance. And so I encourage everyone, number one step, look at all your finances, look at all the wasted money that you're doing, do a time on it, because these are all free things to do, right? A time on it. Where are we spending money? All these little subscriptions that add up everywhere, right? And then the last part of it is you need to find a passion of yours that you want to do. And then in order to fuel that passion, you have to think bigger. And in order to think bigger, you have to read books of other people who have become successful. I'm a big believer in reading or audiobooks or watching YouTube stuff that's actually relevant to these other people that have become successful. Because if I would have taken that more seriously in the beginning, like the application of what Think and Grow Rich and these other business books that I read more seriously, I would be way further than I am now. So now I'm playing catch up, right? And so that's my number one tip to anyone who wants to start entrepreneurship. You have to have the mindset, figure out your finances, develop the passion, and then run with it and just give it time. You have to be patient. It's so hard to be patient these days with instant gratification on virtually everything. Like I'm upset if Amazon doesn't come the same day. I'm like, what do you mean you gotta wait 2 days?
Hey,
Ridiculous,
let's not go there. I live in Hawaii. There's no such thing as same day delivery. So
you're different.
You're lucky if you get it in 2 or 3 days. Actually, but we actually did just open our first distribution center. So who knows if it's a popular item and it's in the distribution center, maybe we might start seeing same day delivery out here on Oahu. That would be pretty awesome. But
might get your cows faster. Who knows?
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So Roy, final question of the final round.
Sure.
And I will preface this one with, besides your own, So now you have a couple of these. But besides your own, do you have a favorite business, investing, or real estate related book or podcast or both?
Yeah. So one of my favorite book is by far for the entrepreneurship, the first level is Think and Grow Rich. On investing, I'm a big believer in real estate. I love real estate because you have so many tax advantages, step up in basis, legacy. There's so many cool things you can do with real estate, and it's physical property. I'm a big believer in tangibility of investments as much as possible. There is diversification in stock market and everything else and insurance products, but having that real estate is amazing. And there's great podcasts. I mean, yours is one of them. The Bigger Pockets podcast is great too. And if you just take some time to learn the fundamentals of it, it's really not that complicated. And the reason why a lot of people don't just all hop in and do it is because they feel that it's complicated and then they get distracted and they never do it, which is fine. Because for those that do actually accomplish it, we can't all be successful. So for those that actually go out there and do it, it's a total win-win strategy.
100%. That's why I do this podcast the way I do it. I like to be able to make things simple for people. I want them to understand that, hey, and the reason why it's called Average Joe Finance is because any average Joe or Jane can do it, right? It's all about your mindset and changing how you think. Like perfect example with that book, Think and Grow Rich, right? So yeah, definitely appreciate that recommendation.
And then I was going to just add to that real quick too. When you asked about the investing thing, one thing I think people have upside down, they'll put money into like retirement accounts before they have a foundation. And the foundation is, hey, look, if you're not here producing that income, how is your family going to make it? Yeah. As boring as it is, and nobody wants to talk about it, life insurance is so freaking important because if you're not here, who's going to pay the bills? The world does 100%. Not care. So I think people on the financial planning realm, they should at least start off with, instead of putting, if they only have $500 a month, put 200 of that towards like a big term life policy. Give yourself some big coverage because you can't afford not to have it, and especially your family. So that's one tip from 15 years of doing this and Forbes Mag, all this fun stuff that I would say is the life insurance.
I agree. I mean, I have a term life insurance policy up against my house. I have an index universal life insurance policy on myself and my wife.
There you go.
Yeah, that stuff is super important. And the fact is, I look at it as an investment too. The beautiful thing about that is I could borrow from it when I want to buy more real estate, which is great. So yeah, I think you got to find the right policy for you and get with a good or a great financial advisor like Roy Snarr here. And he can get you hooked up with some of that. But speaking of that, Roy, so I know you've written, 2 books, right? And I know you have some great information for people in those books and on your website. So speaking of that, where can people find more information about you? Can you share your website with us? Where can we pick up your books? Tell us all that good stuff.
Totally. So my website is just my name, Roy Snarr. So what I tell every entrepreneur, if you're going to go into entrepreneurship, buy your name as a domain. If it's not available,
MikeCavagioni.com. I got it.
There you go. Throw your middle initial in there, do something, because people remember you, not necessarily a business name, right? I mean, will I be as big as Coca-Cola? That'd be awesome, but probably not. So they're just going to remember me and everything else. So just my name, roysnarr.com. That's the best way to do it. And I wrote a book on Social Security, helping people understand this complicated system. And then my partner and I, we wrote a book on long-term care to help shed light on long-term care and the pitfalls of the governmental programs and how they don't cover the majority of services. So it brings awareness, and it's all done through education. And so we help people, life insurance, long-term care, retirement income planning. You can find out all that on our website. We have our phone numbers there, easy question form. It's very simple. And if you're an advisor and an agent listening to this or somebody in the financial services profession, then we also, through that same website, we have training programs for folks out there like that tells you, hey, look, if you're going to be in the financial services or insurance experience in this business, here's all the money I wasted and all the failures I had. Maybe you could just learn a little bit from me and not do that. And we'll help train you to be actually even better. So we have twofolds, the consumers and the agent side of things.
Yeah, I love that. And that's one of the things I talk about too, is if you could learn it from someone else and just pay for the course, if it's that simple, you're probably going to spend less money paying for that course than making the expensive mistakes yourself and getting that master's level degree with that master's level price because you didn't want to do something as simple as learn from someone else.
Yeah. One-time investment for lifetime returns. And that's how I view when I buy courses. I still buy courses. I'm very humble and say, I don't know everything. Because if I did, I'd be in a private jet somewhere else, right? But I'm not. So I want to learn from others that have achieved even higher levels of success.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Roy, this was phenomenal. I think I really enjoyed this conversation. I think
Yeah, me too. It was
it
fun.
provided a lot of value to my audience. Also provided a lot of value to me, right? Got my entrepreneurial spirit, got that bucket filled again. So I really appreciate it. But I wanted to ask you to close things out. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
The final thought I would say is not everyone's cut out for entrepreneurship, and that's okay. And so if you feel that you are, don't be scared because you can always make more money. You cannot make more time. If it doesn't work out, somebody else will hire you. But don't be scared. Don't go through life waiting and, well, I can't do anything now. The kids are in college, blah, blah, blah. And you have to be realistic with it. And here's the powerful thing that I take into consideration and that everyone should too. If you have kids, how are your kids going to view you? Oh, mom and dad, they were cool. They were nice. And yeah, they're average. Or they're going to say, man, mom and dad were amazing. They sponsored charities. All this real estate is what they own. They're helping me out become successful. I want to be an awesome role model for my kids to say, hey, dad was amazing. Mom is amazing. And so you think about your family and how they're going to perceive you.
I love it. I love it. Think about your family, how they're going to perceive you, and just how the outside world looks at you, right? You don't have to.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be crazy. And again, if entrepreneurship's not for you, that's okay.
Totally.
Right? But what are you doing with that hard-earned money that you are working super hard at your W-2 for, right? I think
Right.
that's the question everybody needs to ask themselves. Get yourself to the point where you will be able to eventually walk from that job. So I love it. So thank you for that final piece of
Yeah,
information.
thanks.
I want to say again, Roy, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to have this conversation with me today. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Awesome. Hey, I also want to thank all of my listeners. I want to thank you all so very much for joining me and our special guest today, Roy Snarr, on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you liked this conversation that we had today, go leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you liked about this particular episode with Roy. Aloha from Hawaii, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.